Where did this go? Ahoy, and welcome back to the workaround. This is Bob Gilbreth. You're in good company with a bunch of other startup founders, entrepreneurs, corporate innovators, and you're also lucky enough to be listening in or watching to a really great conversation that we're going to have right now with my friend Dave Rubinstein. Let me tell you a little bit about him, and then we're going to get into it. He has been on the leading edge of B2B sales since the start of the whole digital revolution. That includes being head of sales and getting a startup from zero to $10 million dollars. He had a stint at Salesforce and scaled another big company region from $1 million to $25 million in ARR. Dave and I have crossed paths every couple of years over the decades, and most recently, well, and going back, I think to, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, is time earlier in our careers where I had an agency and he was working at a company called Expo TV that was way ahead of its time, and Procter and Gamble was a giant client for both of us, so we often ran into each other in the halls there. And we caught up recently, and I learned that Dave had a personal challenge that he turned into a period of self-reflection, which also turned into a really impressive project that he's just in the past couple of weeks kind of announced to the world called 100 Founders. And so we'll talk about all that stuff. It's a great opportunity to learn about personal transformations that can come from mid-career professionals, and we'll get into so much more. So, Dave, thanks for being here.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
We made it happen. So, your memory's better than mine. How did we first meet in those halls of P&G those many years
So,
ago?
so I think we met. It's probably like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was what back then was just called the head of sales. If I were in that role today, they would have called me a founding AE.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, I was working for a really small company. I think when we met, we might have even been pre-revenue, and was just trying to crack into P&G and had a couple of brands with traction. And the question I'd always ask is, well, what agencies are you working with? And I think you were at Bridge at the time, and they said, oh, you should talk to Bridge. And the best way to talk to agencies is when the client introduces you. And so I had P&G introduce me to you, and I think that's when we first met.
And I believe you came to our office and did a presentation to tell our company, kind of like a lunch and learn or something, to talk about what you guys did. And I'm not gonna, I mean, I will tell you what I think Expo TV was, but you tell me, like, tell the audience here, like, what was that business about?
Yeah, well, I mean, what we did was we had a platform where our consumers would upload videos about products. So, back in those days, Amazon was first kind of pioneering user reviews, and it was driving sales. So the theory was, well, if text is good and drives people to buy, video should be better. And we had a platform of people doing it. So we were encouraging people to talk about certain brands to get reviews, and then those would be assets that someone like a Procter and Gamble could use on various products or various properties. So that's kind of the business model at the time.
And I remember what I loved about it was, I think that was around the time where I had written a book, kind of as purpose of our agency marketing around this concept of the future of marketing should be marketing with meaning, where, we're creating, the advertising itself adds value and, through the marketing, we're helping people. And I think that was one of I didn't allow everybody into our agency, but in particular, you guys were ahead of the game that now we're seeing with YouTube instructional videos and influencer marketing and of course video, but under that same concept of not about annoying people and interrupting them, but giving them information to help them use the product, understand it, or do the thing that they're trying to buy the product for, which was great.
Yeah, I would say it's that, and it's people who look like me, right? And that was one of the kind of opportunities and challenges as we worked with brands. We'd work with beauty brands, and we'd have consumers who would upload videos about their products, and the brand would say, "Well, that person doesn't look like my target customer." And we'd say, well, they're buying your product. They're like, yes, but that isn't what what necessarily we want to project. So it was an interesting dynamic working with brands and user generated content. People weren't always excited about the content or the source of the content, even though the message was usually on point.
Is that something you look at now, or what would you say is the biggest difference looking back then to what the brands were saying that today they totally get? Like, what did they not get back then that you were just convinced this is it? Why are you guys not getting it?
Yeah, I mean, I think brands today, if anything, are trying to be even more inclusive
Hmm.
and have a larger audience that they can satisfy. I remember, back in those times, there was a very specific consumer for the brand. They looked a certain way, they had a certain hair type or skin type or something.
Hmm.
And today I think that's a little bit different. And I think that there's more of a willingness to say this could work for many different people. We think this may be a primary audience, but there's certainly many other audiences that this could work for, and we want to embrace that. I think you probably see that more from brands today than maybe in the past.
Which is, yeah, I think that's, the rise of consumer generated media. At first they were the brands would try to control it or stop it or sue people but now it's okay, this is just what it is now, and it's not only marketing, but it's research and consumer understanding. And
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
well, how did you get, I mean, that's love to talk a little bit about, were you the first sales person
I
at
was.
this company? Okay. How did you get this job? How do you get a startup off the ground in sales?
Yeah, I mean, I was at the time. It was if I give the year, I'll date myself a little bit, but it was 2008. And I was at Yahoo. And I had gone through 3 years at Yahoo where we'd had three different CEOs. And when I started, you know, Google was beating us. So Google kind of came out in '04. And so Google was kind of having their way with us in '05 when I started. And by '08, when I left, Facebook was starting to have its way with us, right? Because '08 was the year that Facebook went from .edu to everybody could have an account, and that's when it really started to blow up. And so I was coming out of Yahoo, and I was had just really been selling there, and I thought I was ready for something bigger. And startups at the time were offering bigger titles. And
Hmm.
for me, that was the idea of getting a VP title was unbelievable. What did I know? But it was exciting, right? And so they were going to make me VP of sales. The reality was I was VP of sales with a team of zero. So I was the head of sales slash first sales guy, right? And if it were today, they would have called me a founding AE. And so that's kind of where the business was. And it was an interesting time because the business model was selling ads.
Hmm.
So, again, they hire a guy from Yahoo, knows how to sell ads. This Expo TV was a property that got I think it was about 5 million uniques a month, and that they were very, very targeted. So if somebody comes and watches a video review of a Samsung TV, they then link out to Samsung, they buy the TV, right? That it was a very good high click-through business. And selling ads against it made a lot of sense. And traffic was trending up. So that was really the business. Well, about 2 weeks after I get to the company, Google changes their algorithm. Our search traffic goes from 5 million a month to 500,000 a month. And you can't sell ads against 500,000 uniques, no matter how good the traffic is.
Yeah.
So here I am. I'm the first sales guy slash head of sales, and I don't have anything to sell. So that was kind of an interesting challenge. And I really didn't know what I was going to do. And about another week or two passes, and we got an interesting opportunity from a board member. Procter Gamble was running a social media lab, and did we want to be participate in it? So of course the answer is yes. And the way the lab was structured is there were 80 brands, or, I'm sorry, 80 startups were invited,
Hmm.
and they were invited to try to win projects from P&G brands. So brand like Pampers Herbal Essence or Olay, like they would each have a project. And a project was $50,000. And they wouldn't necessarily vet those projects as hard as a normal business expenditure would be vetted. The idea was we want to learn. So here we go. We got 20 brands, 50K a pop, and 80 startups going after those brands. Ready, go. So you want to
Everybody
talk
dying to get the P&G logo, on their
dying, right?
investor deck.
Right, dying. So the urgency, everybody's ready to go all out. So I'm sitting in a room with our president, our CEO, head of marketing, and the CEO is starting to fill out the P&G application. And I said, we're not going to fill out an application. First month on the job, we're not going to fill out an application. If we fill out an application, we're going to lose. We don't have a product. Like we're selling ads, but we can't sell ads anymore. So filling out an application of what we've done or anything, not particularly helpful. The way that we're going to win and the way we're going to be competitive is to play our game and to do something different than everybody else.
Hmm.
And so I said, we're gonna win and lead with insights. And so what do we have that's different? We have a community of people who talk in video, who talk about products in video. Let's leverage that to our advantage. So I said, well, what I want to do is I want to field a research study about things that I think P&G will care about related to social media and what consumers want. And so we fielded this research study and we did it in video. So there were questions that people answered, and then we spliced together this really cool video that had some key themes that we could show. And I called up the head of the social media lab and I said, I'm going to be in Cincinnati because that's what you always say when you're
That's
in
right.
sales. Now, no one wants to have you make the trip just for them, but if you're going to be there, I'd love to meet with you. So
Yep.
I'm going to be in Cincinnati. I happen to have fielded this research study that I think could be interesting to you. Can I share it with you? And he said, absolutely. Can I bring some other people? I said, great, I'll bring lunch. Okay. 10 people show up, mostly kind of various brand managers. And I presented the research. And again, the research was anecdotal, directional at best. It wasn't research that was statistically significant, but we took a shot and we had an insight and a perspective and we put it out there. And at the end of the meeting, two of the brands came up to me and they said, we'd like to partner with you for our project. And that was like this aha moment for me about sales was that in many cases, you are the product as the salesperson. You are the only interaction they have, the only thing they know about your company. So the way you show up is how your company shows up. And they made a decision to work with us because we showed up well. They didn't even know what we sold or what we could sell. They just liked the way we think. And that was a big learning for me. And from that point on, my hypothesis was if we could build something that Procter and Gamble wanted, there'd be many, many, many more customers that would want it. So I went to P&G every month for almost 5 years straight without fail. And I would put a date on the calendar and I would just start dialing. And I would just start sending, hey, Bob, I'm going to be in Cincinnati. Want to meet? Breakfast, lunch. I first watch every trip. I knew all the kind of spots. And then what would start to happen was sometimes people would say to me, "Oh, I wish I had known you were going to be here. I'm actually away that week." I started planning my next trip at that time too. I said, "That's all right. I'm actually going to be there 3 weeks later. I haven't locked in a date yet. Is Tuesday better or Wednesday better for you? The week, you know?" And so I'd start to lock in that trip, and that started to help me every time I saw people and met with people. I could always say when I was coming back, and I'd start to book those meetings. And I learned a ton about the business and it created a perception that we were bigger than we were within P&G. And I think all the agencies believed that. And then pretty soon we grew into that, which was pretty cool.
All right. So beautiful story. And I think there's more chapters of that one that I want to get to. But let me go back to your, 3 weeks into the job or whatever, and you're telling the founder and, the whole executive team, no, we're not doing the application. Here's how we're going to do it. A, how did you come up with that idea? B, how do you sell that into this team that, has got to be desperate by now after the Google traffic loss and the Procter prize.
Yeah, I would say, coming out of Yahoo, one of the things that I learned how to do was sell with insights.
Hmm.
And at Yahoo, we had a tremendous amount of data. And we understood how one particular competitor was doing vis-a-vis their competitive set. We knew what they were doing well, where they were challenged. And what I saw there was that selling with data really works.
Hmm.
And it allowed us to walk into any given sales call with a perspective. And so that was a skill that I developed while I was there. And then I just thought, okay, well, if we're in this situation with Expo, we have no product to sell. So if I upset anyone, it almost like I'm not going to make any money as a sales guy if there's nothing to sell, if I can't sell anything. So my risk of losing a job that wasn't going to be able to pay me anything because we didn't have anything to sell,
Right.
to me, it didn't feel like a huge risk. And I think one of the things that happened then and certainly happens now with the concept of a founding AE is in many cases, if the founder doesn't know sales, they turn to the senior most salesperson they got and they say, help me.
Yeah.
What do we need to do? Sales is our oxygen. What do we need to do to get them? We'll build anything you want. And that was kind of the vibe that I got from the
Mhm.
CEO. So I'm like, all right, well, shame on me if I don't take advantage of the opportunity I have and go down swinging. So that's what we did.
Yeah. I love that. It's funny because usually I hear a lot of bad stories about, I think, and I've done it myself of being the founder who doesn't really understand sales, never really had to hit a number in the quarter or, any of the things that you've done. You and other things too, like a CTO, having never written code before, you kind of don't know what you don't know. And you end up hoping in these times of pivot and challenge, we'll just hire a person, we got to hire someone because I don't know how to do this. And often it's a fear from the founder, of that, afraid to kind of jump in and, you know, but it almost never works out the way it did for you because often you can't, it's hard to attract someone as that first AE, founding AE who can think strategically and take risks and it's usually not, and especially one coming from a larger company. I mean, that would be if you told me we're hiring someone from Facebook today or Google today for my first AE, I would say no way in hell. That person won't know how to hustle. They'll be arrogant. They'll be expecting all this, collateral and budget and things, and marketing team and like that you able. I've never heard a story of someone kind of figuring it out like you did.
Well, I appreciate that. I think I probably got a little bit lucky, but also like my background is maybe a little bit less traditional than your traditional salesperson, right? So, I went to business school. I got an MBA. Coming out of business school, I thought I wanted to be a brand manager or a product manager, and so I went to work at Polaroid as a brand manager, and it was a funny time to go because when I went to Polaroid was the year that the digital camera went mainstream.
Wow.
So if you think about the value of Polaroid, of like seeing the picture right away, what people didn't realize was that two-thirds of our business was B2B. It was insurance. So there was an automobile accident and I got to get a picture of the damage, right? It was real estate. It's like I'm selling a house. Show me what's there. And it was government or law enforcement, right? And so law enforcement could be tampered with, you
Hmm.
know. So the idea of a Polaroid picture was still good because you couldn't tamper with it. But Polaroid lost almost two-thirds of its business almost overnight when digital came out. And where Polaroid was making all its money was on the film. So the cameras you'd sell at a loss, the film you'd make it up. But if all these real estate and insurance agents that were blowing through film and didn't care about cost all go away almost overnight, we got a problem.
Wow.
And so here I was, we're embarking on, the internet is starting to take off. What I felt like was going to be one of the most exciting times of my career. Do I want to look back and tell my grandkids I was at Polaroid? So I quit my job. I quit my job and I moved to San Francisco. And I took a job as a startup as a product manager. So I worked for, a company in the mobile space as a product manager. So I was a product manager and a senior product manager and a director of product management. So having that background of kind of really digging into like what do people want? Why do they want it? And understanding like what do you need to build to satisfy
Hmm.
uh, was something that I started to learn about. Like I wasn't great. I wasn't great at it. And one of the funnier things in my career is that I got fired as a director of product management, and I realized that the part of my job that I liked the most was being in front of customers. And like product management wasn't it. And so I called up the CEO of a competitor and said, I want to, I love what you're doing. I want to come sell for you. And I pitched myself as a sales guy, and then I moved over into sales. But it was, I share that story only to say, as someone who went to grad school, as someone who was in a completely different function,
Yeah.
I was probably a less traditional salesperson,
Hmm.
and I
Hmm.
think I think some of that broader experience helped come into play when I was like, all right, how are we going to solve this problem? And I think throughout my career, where I've really gotten most excited is when there were hard problems
Hmm.
that needed to be solved, and I could kind of figure it out and then scale it.
Love that. And then, so Expo, your another insight that you're hitting on is that I don't hear very often is going back to Expo and Procter and Gamble. If we figure it out for these guys, we'll figure out for others. Let's really concentrate. That's another piece of advice you don't hear very often. Yet it is something that if I think of my business that I was in the process of, building and then, having an earn out when we met, Procter, when we were first acquired in 2005, end of 2004, Procter was 86% of our business. I mean, insane. Um, Other agencies and other companies I've heard, Walmart was a giant client, or I talked to um, a friend last week. Samsung helped him get his business off the ground, and another one, Twitter was their big client, or GE, you hear kind of that over and over again. Was it any pushback there, or was that also just, again, just using your strategy skills to say, if we figure out what these guys will be good?
No, I mean, right now the baseline was pretty low. So we had no clients,
Yeah.
pretty low revenue. And now we get to have a conversation with the board that says we just landed Procter and Gamble as our first client, right? So everyone was kind of at that point, okay, maybe this new guy may know something. Let's give him some rope. Let's give him some space. And what we were able to do was do some high profile things with P&G that other people noticed. It was like you have this content, and I remember having a conversation with someone and I said, "Hey, how would you like to have these videos on Amazon?" And they thought, "Oh my God, that would be amazing. Can we do that?" Well, I didn't know, but what I knew was that they were P&G, and if they wanted something to happen, I knew that my company was going to do everything we could to facilitate their wish. And so
Mm.
I just said, great, you wanted the videos on Amazon? We can do that. Make an introduction to your contacts over at Amazon. Let them know what you want to happen. And why don't we jump on a call with my company, Amazon, and you, and we'll make it happen. And we did. And then once we did that, it was really easy to say, hey, probably makes sense to do Walmart too, right? Maybe Target. Intro, exact same playbook. And then imagine a scenario where you're able to walk into Unilever or Kimberly-Clark or Johnson and Johnson or Colgate-Palmolive, and they can see videos live on product pages on all these major retailers. Would you want to do that too? Of course you would,
Yeah.
right? Let's have that conversation. And so the idea was to build a case study that was public. We weren't sharing any information that wasn't public.
Yep.
But when your content is live on sites, it is public. And so we built a great case study with a high profile brand with the belief that others would want to do it too.
Mhm.
And it turned out to be the right bet.
Well, I mean, you've given like 10 lessons on how to hack your way into the first clients at a startup. This is awesome. What happened next? Where did the company go? Where did this chapter kind of go and finish for you?
So we took it, from call it 0 to probably 10, so somewhere around there. And every big name CPG was a client. And what worked about consumer packaged goods was if someone didn't have the product, it was easy enough to either A, mail it to them, or B, tell them to go into the tell them to go to the supermarket and buy it. And there was some incentive which we called out for doing that. And so people would do it. And so consumer packaged goods was very easy to find people who wanted to, buy or taste the newest Oreo. Like that was relatively easy. It got more challenging as we started to look at other categories because if you wanted to do it with TVs, it's kind of hard
Mm.
because what are the odds that someone's going to have purchased this particular TV, and then if they haven't, sure, I could mail you a $1,000 TV, but there's some logistical challenges to that, and then you have the well, is it really an unbiased review if someone got a free $1,000 TV? And so it became harder to find categories where the business worked
Mm.
outside of consumer packaged goods. And so we built a nice business. We had raised capital, years prior. And
Mhm.
so at a certain point, when your investors are looking at their portfolios and thinking about which are the ones that are going to be home runs and which are the ones that are nice profitable businesses but aren't going to get them the returns that they want, we were kind of in that latter category. So it became more of a lifestyle business where no
Mm.
one was really digging in, pushing for more. And I was still, relatively early in my career. I wanted to do something bigger. And
Mm.
so after 5 years, I just kind of said, you know what? We're not raising capital. We're kind of comfortable with incremental growth. I had at that point I'd hired a team, so I'd closed a bunch of deals and I'd hired a team. So I now had checked the box and now I'm a legit sales leader. And now it's time to try to do that at a place that's a bigger scale.
And where'd you go from there?
So I went to a company called Velti, which was a mobile marketing company. It was small publicly traded company. So it was like at the time it was about $250 million in revenue, $500 million market cap, and I was VP of sales in North America. Right. So exciting to me. The company was founded in Greece and was just starting to kind of launch in the United States and kind of really build out in the US. So I guess it was probably 4 months into my job there. We get a new CFO, and on our first earnings call, he gets on the phone. He says, "I'm lowering all guidance. I'm removing all guidance, and I can't tell you when I'm gonna have guidance for you." And what had happened was there were some financial improprieties, and there are just some questionable, where's the money for, accounts receivable 400 days past due,
Oh,
just
oh.
just didn't just there were some questions, right? And our largest customers were like, companies in nations that are having financial troubles, like so the government of Greece, the Bank of Cyprus, like different parts that were less stable. And so it became clear like we might not get paid that money.
Mm.
And so we're going to have a cash flow issue. And so at that point we started triaging businesses left and right. And one day I get a phone call from a board member, and she says to me, she says, "Dr." And people call me Dr. She said, "Dr. Here's the deal. You probably guessed, but we have a financial problem. I mean, obviously our stock had gone from $10 a share to $1 a share and had just been delisted. And she said, we got a problem and we have to protect cash. So we have just let go of your boss, the CRO, and all of your peers. And we can only pick one leader to keep, and we picked you. We want you to help us get to safety."
Hmm.
So that was kind of an interesting time for me. Super, super exciting and scary because, at that point, imagine our clients were big financial institutions and they don't want to deal with somebody who's going out of business.
Yeah.
And you're trying to sell with this real loud motion, loud voice out there. And I had people on my team come to me and say, hey, DR, are we going to go out of business? And previously in my career, I used to think my job as a leader is to be inspirational and get people excited. But I
Hmm.
realized that that's not what's called for in these situations. And some of these people had families and they needed honesty. And I said to them, I'm like, look, I don't know. I said, I'm in it and I'm going to try to make it work, but you have to do what's best for your family. And I lost some good people, but the people that stayed were so loyal to me and really were ready to run through a wall for me. And that was a big learning for me about being honest as a leader and kind of opening up and being a little bit vulnerable and sharing. And it's okay to say, I don't know. And people fought really hard for me. And we ended up getting to safety and we sold the business to Blackstone. So it was a really proud moment for me to take a really difficult situation and get to an exit. So that was really exciting.
All right. I gotta get into the psychology here. This is good. First, when you get that call, you're the last one left. You're the one we picked. What went through your mind? Like, was it, wow, I feel very proud, or was it, I don't know if I want to be that guy? I mean, they like if I was the leader, I probably would have pulled you aside first and say, "Hey, I think we want you. Are you up for this?" They just said, "You're it." Like,
Yeah,
what
I mean, they
went through
really
your
didn't have a
mind?
choice. They didn't have a choice. This was, the business was, the ship was kind of sinking. So it wasn't the time when you were going to go out and hire somebody. It was kind of like, all right, let's make the meal with the ingredients we got. And I was one of those ingredients. So what do we do? How do we do it? And my mindset, and maybe it's from playing sports all my life or whatever, but is when you're in the game, you don't have time to think about like your choices or your options, whatever. You're playing
Hmm.
and the ball's coming to you. And it's like, what are you going to do? And that was my mindset very much. Like I'm not looking to stop playing.
Yeah.
I'm looking to win. And so what are the things I need to do in order to best position this business to win? And that was my mindset. So I said this earlier, but I get excited by hard challenges.
Hmm.
And this was like a careful what you wish for. This
Yeah.
was different kind of hard. Expo was hard. This was just a different kind of hard. But I dove in.
But that's great. I love the sports analogy. You're playing, you're a player. But the other piece I want to know more about is when the employees are coming to you saying, "I'm worried." You did the right thing, what I believe is the right thing. But I've heard most other cases like that, including, some friends of mine that there was company changes and they went to the CEO, they were even on the executive team, went to the CEO, is this safe? Is my job here? And the CEO said, yes, you're fine. You're good. We're taken care of. No major changes going on. And then like 2 months later, they sell the company or some other situation, like literally lied to the person in their face. And I guess I wonder what made you not think, that's a selfish decision. It's I need, there's a fear. I need to keep this person, say this other example, a deal's getting negotiated if this person leaves, or, oh, I might have to give them more money. I mean, there's lots of situations you could say that would be almost easier to just say, trust me, it's all good, and maybe safer in some cases, but you didn't do that. Can you remember what went through your mind there, or why
Yeah,
under that test you went this way instead of the other way?
yeah, it's a fair question, and I wish I had a better answer. At the end of the day, it's not who I am, and I think being able to me, there's nothing more important than being able to sleep and being able to look in the mirror and be proud of who you are and the way that you conduct yourself. And I couldn't do it. And if that meant I was going to lose some people, I'd sleep better. And that made me okay. And what I found was that in doing that, there was a lot of goodness that doing the right thing brought. And people saw it. People around me saw it. And I think bringing that to everything I do every single day at every company I've ever been at has helped me attract great talent and hopefully build a reputation and have clients that want to work with me again. And all of those things I think come from doing the right thing. So it was never a question for me. It was never a dilemma. It was just like,
Yeah.
of course this is what you do.
And it's doing the right thing. It's not Dave's a good guy. It's no, under the moments that it counted. These are the where the whole universe is kind of going, let's see what he does, doing the right thing in those moments, at personal risk as well. It's awesome.
Yeah. Being a good guy hasn't been something that I've focused on. I think very early in my career, I thought it mattered. And I think as you progress and you learn more, it's more important to do the right things. It's more important to treat people the right way. It's more important to help people grow in their careers. It's more important to help people feed their families. And I think if you do those things, people will think you're all right. But if your end goal is to be a good guy, I think it's the wrong goal.
Yeah. All right. So great test there. You then went and did a stint, or I might be skipping around to it, but I really want to learn about your experience at Salesforce, the behemoth of sales. Yeah, I've got several friends who are there or have done stints there. You were there for almost 6 years. Give me like your biggest takeaway from the king of sales company, Salesforce?
Yeah, and Salesforce was the next stop on my journey. So having done Expo and said, you know what, I want to go to a place that scales and that's bigger. So I went to
Safer,
go.
maybe.
It didn't play out the way I wanted. And so I thought, all right, where can I go where I can learn world-class execution? And
Hmm.
so I went to Salesforce, which, at the time, it was really one of those places where if you're in sales, that's a place that you want to be. Like you're going to learn from the best. And I was really, really fortunate and that in my 6 years at Salesforce, I reported to six different people. And so, it's kind of a good news, bad news, because when you have a boss, I always think of them as like a vertical couple. And you kind of understand each other and how you work well and what the other one likes and all these different things. And that makes the relationship great. And then you get to a point where you're comfortable. And being comfortable is the enemy of being great. And so one of the things that I found was that while I liked being comfortable and you'd work with someone for a year and you just be getting in a groove, now all of a sudden I go to somebody else and I got to relearn what they like.
Hmm.
Well, it wasn't great while I was going through it. But afterwards, I was like, wow, that was awesome because I learned these things from this person and these things from this person and these things from this person. And I'd say, oh, from this person, I didn't love this, so I'm not gonna borrow this.
Hmm.
But we did this one thing, maybe a little bit differently. I would like that. And that helped me build kind of my own leadership style, like through seeing the best, the best of the best. So that was one thing that I learned at Salesforce that was really helpful for me is like, what's my operating rhythm? What do I want to stand for? How do I want to be as a leader? And the other thing, and so with Salesforce, and some people know this, some people don't, is we have monthly quotas. And so when you're running a business with a monthly number, one, you have to know your numbers backwards and forwards to be able to manage it to the month.
Hmm.
So that's one side of the spreadsheet. But the other side is it's really hard to drive people to a number like your sellers every single month without burning them out.
Hmm.
So I learned this balance of how do you drive people? How do you get the best? But when do you know, how do you pull back a little bit and say, hey, you know what? I think this person's burning out a little bit or they need a little bit of a break. We're going to make our number in July, but maybe Mary and Steve aren't going to be major contributors. I'm going to lean on some other people on the team, and then
Hmm.
they can pick up the slack in August. but kind of earn it, figuring out that balance. And, we use the term a lot, hearts and minds.
Mhm.
Winning hearts and minds was something that I really hadn't really thought about before I got to Salesforce. And then once I got to Salesforce, it became my drumbeat. It was just like that was the thing that I wanted. And if people were out there looking for a leader, I wanted them to go, we want to go work for DR because he's going to take care of, he's going to help drive us to be most successful in our careers. It's
Mhm.
not going to be easy, but he's going to stretch us and he's going to make us better. And that was something that I learned. I think, one of the things that was interesting is, I talked a little bit about for myself, working for six different people over that time. I got a new team every year. So every year I got new sellers because we were promoting people really fast.
Yeah.
And so by
Hmm.
creating this brand of someone who develops their people, it became much easier for me to become a talent magnet because at a place like Salesforce, the sellers have all the power. If you're a good seller, you choose which team you're going to be on. Are you going to be on the
That was going to
Slack
be my next question is
team?
how did that talent market work
Right.
internally?
Are you
Interesting.
going to be on the Slack team or the Datorama team or the
Yeah.
Service Cloud team or and so they pick where they want to go and they all talk. So if you've built the right brand and you've developed people, even though you're promoting your best people, guess what? They're saying to all the people that look up to them, you want to be on this guy's team and this
Hmm.
guy's going to look out for you. And so that was something that really helped me as a leader.
And was that a strategy that you had going in? I mean, did you kind of see it as, well, it's a competitive market for the best people, and if I'm a great boss, or was it just more of your natural skills and charms that were working its magic?
No, I mean, some of it was just observation. And, in sales, it's all about pattern recognition and trying things and seeing what works. And I remember early on in my tenure, I had a boss who said to me, he said, I think I was like a month into the job, and he said, "Hey, what do you think the people out on the floor think of you?" And I said, "Well, I think my team, would say really good things."
Mhm.
He said, "Yeah, that's great, but what about the rest of the people that are out there on the floor that don't report to you directly? What would they say?"
Hmm.
I said, "I don't really know." He said, "Well, that's a problem." He said, "You're a leader in my org, and it's not you're a leader of your team. You're a leader to everybody else that's out there,
Hmm.
regardless of whether they report to you or not. And if you don't know how they would respond to you or think of you, that's a problem. And
Hmm.
so I need you to think bigger as a leader." And that was kind of one of those moments for me in my career. I was like, whoa, I felt
Like
stupid.
the truth shown down, and
You know,
like,
what I mean?
well, it's like an
I felt,
unlock.
yeah, I mean, I felt kind of dumb, but at the same time, I'm like, he's not wrong.
Yeah.
He's not wrong. And that was a big aha for me that I try to share with people that have been on my teams in years past.
Well, what did you do to then spread your leadership more widely?
What I realized was that it wasn't just about me helping people that reported to me, but it was about how could I be a force for good to help the broader team do well.
Hmm.
And so I made a point of just getting to know everyone in the, as part of that was part of the bigger team and spend a little time with them and learn what they were working on and provide an insight here or there or share something that I thought would be helpful. And that really made a difference and helped the broader team achieve our goals. So that felt good.
That's awesome. All right, you're a treasure trove, I'm sure. I'm gonna fast forward though the career button because I want to make sure we get to some juicy stuff on your 100 Founders project. But let's get into that. Tell the story, kind of your most recent career stop, and kind of what happened from there, and then we'll get into. I'd love to hear more about 100 Founders. But how did you end up there? Give me let's share
Yeah,
your.
I mean, yeah, I mean the two things that kind of led to it were one, I went to Meta and I was working for a startup that had been acquired by Meta, and 3 weeks after I got there, my team went from 55 down to 8, right? Because the year of efficiency happened, and I realized at that point, like no matter where you go and no matter what you do, you don't have that much control. Like you're and I didn't like that feeling. And then I went from there. I went to a startup and I just made the wrong choice. Like it wasn't a great fit. And after those two experiences back to back, I was like, I need a break.
Mm,
And I was planning on taking the summer off. I was going to play a bunch of golf. I was going to travel. I was going to live my best life and figure out what I wanted to be when I grew up in the fall. Like that was my plan. And the challenge I ran into was I'm not good at doing nothing.
mm,
I'm not good without a goal. I like interacting with people on a regular basis, and I am naturally curious. So with everything that's happening with technology, I want to be in it. I want to play with it. I want to see it. I want to learn what's new every single day. And when not working, it's tough to be in the game. And
mm.
so I had this challenge where I didn't want a boss, but I wanted all those other things that work provides. And so I was just like, all right, one day I went on LinkedIn and I just posted, I'm going to meet 30 founders in the next 30 days. And I just thought it would be a way to entertain myself. I'd learn a bunch, I'd sharpen my sword. And when I started to think about what I wanted to do next in the fall, I'd have a better story, I'd have more insights. Like that was my plan. But sometimes in life things don't go according to plan. And this was one of those things where it kind of surprised me. I started talking to founders and they were asking me more questions than I was asking them.
Mm.
And what happened was, I'd reach out, we'd have a conversation, and people would look at my background and they'd say, "Oh, I noticed you worked at Salesforce, so you worked at Outreach. Can I pick your brain on go to market?" Or they'd say, "Oh, you're talking with 30 other founders. Can I ask you some questions about what you're seeing, what the trends are out there?" And I was like, "Oh, there's a real appetite to learn what's out there around these smaller companies, under $10 million of ARR, B2B companies." And what I was finding was like 80% of the founders that I was talking to were tech founders. They weren't like salespeople, but they were kind of more technical in nature. So they were really intrigued by go-to-market, and many had no idea how to attack it. And they were just kind of diving in. And at the end, I realized I was onto something when at the end of every call, they started introducing me to more founders
Mm.
and people in their network. So what I thought was a decent goal of, meeting 30 founders became a really weak goal. And, right now I'm somewhere around 165 I've met so far. And that's in, probably less than 4 months. So I'm meeting with so many different founders and developing this perspective. And then founders started to say to me, "Hey, are you documenting your journey anywhere? I'd love to know what you're learning." And so I was like, well, I'm recording every call. There's no reason that I couldn't pull together some killer insights from all these
Yeah.
transcripts and everything I've learned. And so I wrote up my first 100 and like what I learned, and I put together like some insights, and the response to it's been unbelievable. And I keep having conversations with founders, and here we are. It's now the fall, or it will be. Yeah, I guess it's officially past the fall, or we're in the fall, and I've
Officially Q4, my friend.
well, yep, it's officially Q4, and I've kind of decided like I'm not going to stop doing this. And along the way, I've had people hire me. I've had people say, "Wow, I really appreciate your perspective. Can you help me? Can you help me in a more formal way?" And so now I have clients, and it's actually going to be a business. And I haven't formally announced it, but it will be announced pretty soon. And so yeah, I mean, I have my LLC, which is super super exciting, and I have clients, and so now it's a business, and I'm kind of figuring it out, but wasn't the plan.
Well, let's see. I mean, I wanted to spend some time talking about where you're going from here on the business. But first of all, let's give us a few of the biggest insights from these now 160 something discussions you've had. Was it all around kind of sales and go to market? Was that the theme? And what are some of the things that big takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, usually the conversations are about 30 minutes. The founder starts off, they tell me a little bit about themselves, they tell me about their business, and then I say, we can go in any direction you want. Talk to me about, you know, let's talk about what you want to talk about.
Uh-huh.
And I think what's been interesting, I think I said earlier, about 80% of the founders that I've talked to are more technical in nature.
Yeah.
And so selling is messier than I ever realized. Like I knew kind of, everyone talks about founder-led sales. Very rarely do people break out the difference between founder-led sales when the founder comes from a background in sales and founder-led sales when the founder doesn't. And
Interesting.
they're, very, very different. The founder-led sales, when the person comes from sales, it's like they understand it, they understand how to come up with an ICP, they understand the positioning. When the founder comes from a technical background, they're really good at making sure they've got a ton of feature-rich offerings. But if you ask them how they're different than what's out there, or some other kind of basic questions, they don't know kind of how to do discovery. They don't know what a sales process looks like. So it's like, all right, I'm going to show up on meeting one, I'm going to do some basic discovery. Meeting two, I'm going to do a demo. Meeting three, I'm going to show them a proposal and they're going to buy.
Hmm.
Maybe, but it's rarely in sales is it that linear. There's particularly if you're talking up market. And there's a lot that founders don't know about sales. They don't know how to hire salespeople. They don't know, in many cases, what I was seeing with founders is they were thinking product market fit is when they've sold a few. But those few that they've sold all look different from one another, are all priced different. The offerings are all different. So they had to customize a little here, customize a little bit there. And all those deals came from warm intros from their own personal relationships
Hmm.
or from someone the board knew.
Hmm.
And so that's not product market fit. And so that's been a big thing and many of these founders are hiring too soon because they hate selling. So they're
Yes.
like, all right, I want out. I'm going to hire a salesperson. We don't have a process yet, but you know what? The salesperson, AKA a magician, is going to figure it all out. They're going to figure out pricing and differentiation and how we go to market. And I'll just hire them. And then I can focus on the things I'm more comfortable with. That happens every single day.
They need you 20 years ago, the unicorn. Um, but this raises a lot of questions for me. The first one is, isn't this, I know technical, is one thing, but a lot of what you're saying in my mind is product manager. I mean, that's the person who also is talking to clients and is deciding what are we going to build? Like, what's the real need there? What is that really sales? Like, I know that like those first couple of clients, help me with that.
Yeah, I mean it's tricky. It's usually, in many cases in the early stages of a business, the product manager doesn't exist. So the product
Okay.
manager is also the CTO, right? Like so the CTO, the technical co-founder is figuring that part out. And they're just thinking about what are the features that can get added. So this
Right.
first salesperson slash tip of the spear is feeding all this information into the business. Go, okay, I met with this client, this is what they want, and that's kind of a lot of how the process is happening. But one of the big takeaways that I had was most founders don't necessarily understand the difference between curiosity and intent. So if you think about what's going on with AI today, every executive on the planet knows they need to learn more,
Mhm.
right? So that drives curiosity. So what that means is that I'm willing to take, as an executive, I'm willing to take more meetings with companies out there to learn about technology so that I can educate myself so that down the road I can make better decisions. That's curiosity. Intent is I have money and I have a project and I'm looking to spend some of that money on this specific initiative. And
Yeah.
that's a problem that many, many, many founders have is that they look at their pipeline and they confuse curiosity with intent,
Mhm.
right? Someone's willing to do a pilot. No, no, we got these pilots. They're interested. Pretty
Dude,
easy.
I'm just like, you have perfectly phrased a thing that I have felt so many times in selling new stuff. I mean, it's like you're sitting there on the startup side and you go, I'm getting meetings. I had something 2 years ago I was working on. We had meetings. on this idea. It was a hot trend. Someday I'll talk about it fully, but I'm not ready yet. Hot trend. We got meetings with C-level people at every big company we wanted and like no buyers. And and that took me a year in 50 pitches with them sitting in the room going, oh, it's got to be important to them that they're taking this meeting, and speaking with us. Why are we not getting it? Oh, because it's like they've got time. They want to learn. They don't, like actually the intent and everything that comes with it. Finding the money, finding who's going to own it. How do we build this into our current process? What habits do we have to break, which are so impossible? How are we going to prove the ROI? I mean, all those things that, we, and my business partner Ryan and I just shifted to, we're not doing anything else unless it's something people are already buying today. That if, they already have money, they're already putting budget against it, great. If not, we're out.
Yeah.
It's a
That's
great.
that's important learning, but most don't differentiate.
Well, how do you? That's great. Well, let me. But you're already getting paid to help solve these problems and answer these questions. Take that one. What's the answer? What do you do? Like, where do you? You're the founder, and you've seen this movie, and you're saying, well, you're not getting the intent. What do you do now? Do you close up the shop? What happens?
Well, so you need to understand how to qualify, and you need to understand kind of what's important. And most most people out there, many founders out there, think about the problem that they solve, right? And so I think everybody feels pretty good if what they have maps to a problem, and that's kind of the most basic thing out there. And to me, it doesn't get you very far because most problems that exist have existed forever, right? So if you think about a problem that you might solve, so maybe everyone's trying to solve pipeline, right?
Mhm.
Well, no, they have a pipeline problem and I have a pipeline solution. This is a fit, right? But what they don't understand is like, okay, I understand pipeline is a problem. What I would always ask someone is, okay, you're trying to solve pipeline. Why now? Like my guess is that you've had a pipeline problem for the last 10 years. You have a workaround. You've survived. The business is still a going concern. Why now? And that's the question that people have to answer that very few can. And
Mhm.
so the thing I always want to understand is what's changed to make solving that problem now matter,
Mhm.
right? Most people stop at what's the problem, but what's changed to make solving that now matter? And the reason that that's so important is you want to be able to answer, oh, you just had a terrible board meeting and the board is now measuring X. Oh, you just hired a new chief revenue officer who's focused on Y.
Mhm.
Oh, you have a new competitor who's coming into your space who's now starting to win a lot of the business that you previously won in this vertical. Oh, like those are all what's changed. And there are countless others, but if you can't answer what's changed to make solving it now matter, it's just curiosity.
Mhm.
So that's really where I would encourage people to dig in.
Mhm. Mhm. So you look at yourself as coming in and, as you're being brought in for these projects or even a half-hour discussion, you've seen a lot of things in sales, but you've also seen other parts, across large companies, small companies. You've been a brand manager, product manager. Um, is it that unique perspective do you think you're offering? Like, is that what you're able to put all that thing together for them and be in their shoes?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, having talked to call it 165 founders in a short period of time, my data and perspective is really current. So while I've worked for a long time and there's some value in that, I think the a lot of the real unique value or the thing that makes me different than anyone else out there is that I'm talking to volumes and volumes of founders today. And I'd argue that there's probably no one else on the planet outside of investors that talk to as many startups as I do.
Mhm.
And when you're pitching to an investor, you're showing up in a certain way,
Mhm.
right? You're not highlighting the warts, you're not highlighting your challenges, you're just talking about why you're awesome and
Right.
why you're going to the moon. And when you're talking to me, you can be a little more honest. And
Mhm.
one question that I ask every founder is, what's holding you back? Even the ones that start off, they talk about how they're crushing it, and I'll always ask, what's holding you back? And that's something that I like to think I get a more honest answer than anyone else. And so when I'm talking with founders, I know many other founders that are dealing with the same challenge. I know how they're attacking it. And in a world where the some of the answers maybe are from patterns that we've seen in the past, and maybe some we've never really run into this exact challenge with the technology stack that we have today. I feel like I'm probably uniquely qualified to help figure those things out because one, I figured out hard challenges through my whole career. And
Mhm.
two, I have the context of all of these different founders that I'm talking to and plans to attack gives me a pretty good starting point for how to attack the next problem.
Love that. Yeah. I mean, I go back to if, when I had investors, if I was asked that question, I wouldn't be fully honest. You can't. It's just, and they wouldn't be fully honest back to me. I mean, let's be honest, let's be just the way it is. There's conflicts of interest and all along the lines there because each party's kind of working for something else. It's you could go on and on that one. But what are you going to do now? So this is your first entrepreneurial venture. It's your baby, it's your brand, your business. You're getting to be you're getting to be the marketer and the salesperson, the delivering the product. What do you want to do now? This is the next big mountain. Where are we going?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of different directions that it can go, and I wish I knew the answer. I think, right now, the initial clients that I have allow me to feed my family and keep the lights on. But I think that one of the things that's really exciting to me is I'm focusing on the zero, call it 500,000 to 10 million ARR space, B2B tech founders, right? I'm figuring out how do I know more about that space than anyone else on the planet. And that's on a global basis, right? And so, many of the founders that I'm meeting with, probably 20% or so, are outside the United States. Maybe 20, 25% are outside the United States. And so what's starting to happen is I'm getting requests about lots of different things from people that are tangentially interested in this space. So maybe you're venture capitalist and you want to understand some of the things that I'm seeing because again, the volume that I'm seeing, you know, there are going to be deals and things that I see that other people don't. And
Yep.
and so there's interest there. There's any number of places in that space where people are asking for help. I'm now getting founders are starting to say to me, "Hey, I'm a technical founder. I've actually already hired a head of sales. Would you mentor them? Would you coach them? Would you
Yeah.
you know would you give them the things that I can't give them?" And
Mm.
so those are things that are starting to come up, and I have no doubt. I think on the insights front, again with AI, there are only two things in my mind that matter that don't get replaced. One is relationships, and every time I meet a new founder, that's a new relationship that started. And two is data and having proprietary data. And again, because I record every conversation, there's a data set that I have that no one else has. And so I'm really just focused on how do I leverage those two things to grow. But I think my general philosophy is if you connect with people and you add value, good things will happen.
Mm.
And that's kind of how I'm going forward full speed.
What have you learned about yourself so far in this project?
I've learned I can do more than I thought I could.
Mm.
I've learned that it's not as risky as I thought. I think I've always thought about starting a business, and I think for whatever reason there was always a reason why I couldn't or shouldn't, or I had a family to support, and what I realized is for me, it's certainly not riskier, and in many cases, knock on wood, it's less risky because the one thing I can control is myself and betting on myself. And as there are changes in the macro environment and in technologies, like I can move faster, just me, than a company can. And I'm just excited to bet on myself and see where it goes.
Yeah. I think you're on. You got a big, awesome adventure ahead, and I think one of the things that helped me making the first entrepreneurial jump was that idea that hey, I can always get a job somewhere else. Your trusted network, your years of experience. If this whole thing comes crashing down, or you hate being an entrepreneur, which I've met my fair share of people who hated all that, or liked it for a bit, and the honeymoon was over, and the grind didn't work out. You'll be great and have had learned even more by doing all these things yourself and building something from scratch. It's if nothing else, you're even more valuable to someone. But I don't think you're gonna go back to something else. I think this is gonna I think you're onto something awesome here, and you're gonna have a lot of fun in the process, and I think make a big impact too, because I think what you're seeing is, it's just fascinating. The other point, I just hearing you, I go, aren't these the same challenges we read posts about 15 years ago? We're still having the same mistakes and the same conversations and the same what's product market fit conversation, and like that, all that data is out there, all but when you're sitting in that chair, you don't have time to go read everything, and investors don't have time to tell you everything. You've got to figure it out for yourself. And I think it comes back to exactly what you said is AI. You could sit here and AI could fill you full of documents, but having a human being who you're building a trusted relationship, help you, walk through the challenge and creatively see opportunities and then make even further connections out in the world. Your value is going to get even higher.
I hope so. I hope so. That's the plan. But I think too, where you started, I don't know if I've ever had more fun and been more excited and energized. And I wake up in the morning and I'm like, all right, am I a salesperson right now, or am I a delivery person right now, or am I the collections person right now, or am I the website builder right now?
Yeah,
It's exciting. It's fun. It's fun to learn new things, and at times it can be as it can be completely overwhelming. But to me, the most important thing is the mindset, and waking up in the morning and be like, I got this. And most mornings I'm waking up saying that, so it's pretty fun.
that's awesome. Well, you're a shining light to the rest of us. Thanks for coming on and sharing your stories. I learned a bunch of new stuff. I'm sure we all did. I cannot wait to talk again in the months ahead to see where we go from this. When you're going to get to 1,000 founders here pretty soon at this pace that you're on, this scale pace. Um,
So can I share one last thing I guess I'd share is my plan is to do 100 founders every quarter and just keep publishing the information. So I'll probably do a quarterly report every quarter and then, update my Substack every week or two.
yeah,
I'm starting to get videos from founders
yeah,
demoing. So stay tuned for some live demos. But if anyone wants to follow the journey, just go to www.100founders.ai.
excellent. And you're also on Substack and LinkedIn, and I'll give links in the notes here to all that stuff for you too.
Yeah.
All right, date DR. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Good to see you.
All right, good luck.